Welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside not one, but two special guests. Our draft experts, Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone, are both here for another year of mock draft. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Great, thank you. How about you?
Fantastic. I see you mock drafting all the time. We're going to get into our mock draft in a second. Kyle, I have a question for you because you're our noted Oklahoma City Thunder fan. As you can see, I'm wearing the Supersonics t-shirt here. And I've been told by the league that the Oklahoma City Thunder have never won an NBA championship. I guess that's like super Seattle erasure here. I want to take the temperature for the both of you. Are we just erasing all of the history that went before the Thunder? It just starts in Oklahoma City?
I'm getting a report in my ear. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. The Thunder are the only relevant part of this team. The Seattle Supersonics have been erased from history. I'm sorry to report, John.
The glove, the Rain Man, what would NBA history, what would my childhood be without those guys? I mean, that just can't happen.
That's the correct answer. Adam is correct on that one. Justice for Seattle one day, eventually, hopefully. All right, we're going to do our mock draft here. I believe last time that we had you two guys on the program, Adam went first. So we're going to have Kyle go first on this one. The Dallas Mavericks have the number one pick after having just a 1.8% chance to jump up to the top spot. Han Solo voice, never tell me the odds. We expect them to draft Cooper Flagg. Are they going to go off menu? No, you never know what's going to happen with Nico Harris, and he could trade this pick to a league in Europe somewhere. Who knows? Which way are they going here, Kyle?
Yeah, they're going to pick Cooper Flagg, the best prospect in this class. For me, the best prospect I've scouted since Victor Wembanyama just a couple of years ago. He has a higher prospect grade that I gave out to, the likes of Luka Doncic, Cade Cunningham, Zion Williamson. He's a special talent. He's the clear number one in this class. Nico Harrison has made some questionable decisions with the Dallas Mavericks here over the last year, I think, to put it mildly. But Cooper Flagg, I think, is the easy free space here at number one for the Dallas Mavericks in this draft.
All right, I expected that Adam will agree with this. But Adam, as we look at the Dallas Mavericks, and Kyle used a genteel euphemism there by saying that Nico has made some questionable decisions when he ships Luka off to LA and everybody freaks out. And then all of a sudden, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, I tend to enjoy those things. Dallas somehow, just the basketball gods shine on them and give them the number one pick back. They take Cooper Flagg here. Is that the right decision for the organization? Obviously, long-term, it probably would be. But what about in the interim? Because, Kyrie's got an ACL situation. Anthony Davis is consistently injured, not getting any healthier anytime soon. Klay Thompson was charged with doing a lot of the playmaking. Can they get some playmaking out of Cooper Flagg? And could he be a contributor right away and make them potentially Western Conference contenders?
Yeah, I think he can both make them a contender and simultaneously build a bridge to the future. The situation with Kyrie is interesting because Dallas is a team that really needs some creation, right? Especially without Kyrie in the lineup. And that's an area of Cooper's game where we saw quite a bit of growth this year at Duke, because coming out of high school, although he was the obvious number one player in the class, it wasn't necessarily for his scoring prowess. Like he put up some video game like numbers in his last EYBL, but it was actually in the Nike E16. He was playing down a level before he reclassed. So we had questions about, is this guy an offensive alpha? Would he be able to do that at Duke? He answered those questions. I still think there are questions about how that will translate to the NBA level, but as secondary creator, no doubt about it. And I think those first few months with Kyrie out of the lineup will only accelerate his learning curve. And then he's going to be able to impact winning pretty quickly. And then I think be the future face of this program.
I'm so torn on this. On the one hand, I lived in Dallas for a while. I have friends in Dallas. They were completely distraught and despondent after Luka got traded. And I want nice things for my friends. And on the other hand, as a Mavericks organization, just completely set that thing on fire and traded Luka, a generational talent at 25 years old, 5 straight first-team All-NBA selections. They ship him off to the Lakers of all teams. I'm not sure that they should be rewarded here, but they will be, evidently. All right, so we have Kyle's Wembanyama jersey hanging behind him. The other team that jumped up high in the draft, the San Antonio Spurs. I suspect, Adam, not a lot of drama here either with the number 2 pick, right?
Probably not, but more potential than at number one. I think Dylan Harper is pretty clearly the number two prospect on the board. He's a big lead guard, 6'6", terrific feel for the game. Obviously, great bloodlines. His dad, Ron Harper, was Michael Jordan's running mate with the Bulls, former NBA All-Star and world champion. Dylan is a playmaker, great feel. The shooting is a little bit of a work in progress, but if that ever clicks, he's going to be virtually unguardable, and he's not a non-shooter by any stretch. What's interesting, though, is the fit with San Antonio. Now, at number two, I understand you do not draft for fit, but this is a program that traded for De'Aaron Fox a year ago. They've got Steph Castle, who's the reigning NBA Rookie of the Year, and that's a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands, and it brings up some spacing concerns. So I think Dylan Harper is the pick here, but I think it's going to present a little bit of a coaching challenge in year one in terms of how do you feed all these guys? How do you get the necessary spacing around Wemby? And I got to be honest with you, I think if Milwaukee calls and they're going to entertain a Giannis conversation, I think San Antonio probably listens. I know that's not what's being reported right now, but I do think they would have to listen to that type of scenario.
So a couple of things there, Adam, that I want to flag, because I wrote all these down, and like you're kind of reading my mind here. When I look at the San Antonio backcourt, I'm like, wait a minute. They just went and traded for De'Aaron Fox, who's not a great shooter from deep. They have Stephon Castle, who's an excellent athlete. I think he projects to be a star in this league, potentially an all-star. He's awesome, like athletically, super dynamic, but he can't really shoot either, Kyle. I want to go to our resident Victor Wembanyama San Antonio jersey correspondent, Kyle Boone, on this one. Help me understand. Like, I understand that everybody loves Dylan Harper, but you're telling me that they're going to have a third guard who can't shoot?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Dylan Harper is necessarily a non-shooter, but certainly I think the fit with Dylan Harper, with De'Aaron Fox, with Stephon Castle, that trio, I think there are some real questions about how that would work, how that rotation would work, the level of satisfaction that all three of these players would have playing with one another. And I don't think anyone expected the Spurs to get the number two pick in this draft. I don't think the Spurs expected to be in this position. This is a really valuable pick. Dylan Harper would be the number one pick in this class, or in a lot of classes. And so, I think there's a chance that, right now the Spurs seem to be content with keeping this pick and sticking here and picking the best prospect, who I think is Dylan Harper. But as Adam alluded to, you could go out and dangle this pick to try and get a Giannis, try and get a Kevin Durant, try and get a big piece to put next to Victor Wembanyama, because your backcourt is mostly set. Fox and Castle, I think, are the future. Wemby is the future in that front court. I think if you add another star to this mix, you could do that with the number two pick and some other assets that, are very valuable in this draft class.
Yeah, you guys are both really smart, and that's the way that I was leaning on this, that right now, everybody loves their pick and where they've landed in the draft, and of course they would never even dream of trading this valuable number two pick. If Giannis came, we couldn't have Giannis, we want this pick. I'm not buying it. And by the way, Pop had said previously after they got Wemby that the San Antonio Spurs deserve no more luck in the draft lottery. Well, I guess the basketball gods weren't listening, because they got more luck here. All right, the number three team, I'm being told nobody is going to draft at number three, because that team that's supposed to draft third has been disbanded by the NBA, or at least I was hoping that was what's going to happen. But evidently they're going to let the Philadelphia 76ers, who are an abomination and a curse, a pox upon my house, Kyle, they're going to let them draft at three. Who are they taking?
I can't believe they're going to let them draft at number three, but that number three, the 76ers are going to take VJ Edgecombe. And, maybe this is a surprise. I know probably a lot of 76ers fans have already talked themselves into an Ace Bailey or into a Knueppel, but VJ Edgecombe makes a lot of sense for me. I think he would be the guy who, if I am picking for the 76ers, he'd be the guy that I would take, if my job is tied to this decision. He's a 34% three-point shooter, two-way impact wing. He's got good size. I think he can be a really good, impactful defender. You're looking to pair pieces with Jared McCain, with Tyrese Maxey for the future. I think VJ Edgecombe checks a lot of boxes there at 15 points per game last season. As a true freshman at Baylor last season, 5.5 rebounds, 3.2 assists. He can do a lot of different things for you. And oh, by the way, his mixtape is pretty sick too. Like his highlight reel dunks and the way that he can get downhill is a lot of fun. I think he'd make for a really fun plug and play type of prospect with the Sixers, who have a really fun young core they're starting to build right now.
Adam, I love that expression on your face. I want you to hold it right there. We're going to go to break because I got a lot of questions about this. Unfortunately, for everybody in Philadelphia and for everybody watching at home, we have to discuss this a little bit further about the Sixers and the fit and the expression on Kyle's face, or Adam's face. Adam, that is my default Sixers face that you just did there. So nicely done by you adopting the general vibes in Philadelphia. Quick break. On the other side, we'll continue with our mock draft and our mock draft experts. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc, our second annual mock draft here with our draft experts, Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone. And Fink, can I call you Fink? Kyle Boone called you Fink. I'm going to call you Fink too. You were doing this bit here, which I thought was really appropriate because we were talking about the Sixers, and Kyle had ascribed VJ Edgecombe to the team. Were you despondent because you don't like VJ Edgecombe, because you know the 76ers are beyond repair unless VJ Edgecombe has some sort of like magical shaman powers that can turn Embiid into a guy who can get out on the court? What was it about this selection that you didn't like?
I love VJ. It's the Ace Bailey slander that Boone is now subscribing to with so many other people. I just don't get it. I mean, I think Ace Bailey is almost 6'9". He is a high level athlete. And I mean like momentum changing, explosive finishes. And he is a big time shot maker. Does he have to smooth out some of the rough edges in his game? Absolutely. But people are talking about assist rate and different kinds of things. And like, listen, this is checkers. This isn't chess. 6'9" wings who are high level athlete and extreme shot makers. Those are what we call all-stars in the NBA. So if they're open at 3, and by the way, VJ Edgecombe is 6'4", and you already have Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain in your backcourt. Like, I just don't see. Now, I agree that they might be thinking like this, but if it's me and I'm making the pick, it is Ace Bailey all day long.
Yeah, I mean, with apologies to both of you and both of those kids, I don't think either of them were going to have the necessary ability to get the 76ers from where they started the season, and we're talking about being Eastern Conference contenders, and then the wheels came off, the doors came off, the windows came off, everything that could break ended up breaking, including Joel Embiid and PG. Let's move on from the Sixers. So obviously, Adam, you love Ace Bailey. I suspect you have him going to the Hornets here. How's the fit for them?
Yeah, listen, I would take him and I think they would rejoice that he's available at 4. But I think the fit is actually a little concerning because you got Brandon Miller, someone else who's a shot maker, doesn't put a ton of pressure on the rim. And that's the area of Ace's game that he could stand to really improve at. In fact, one of the comparisons that I've been utilizing lately is somebody like Michael Porter, a high-level athlete who can really get loose in transition and then tends to settle for some jumpers in the half court. Ace has got a little of that in his game. So if I'm Charlotte, I would want more of a defender and rim pressure guy here. But again, if you have the 6'9" jumbo athlete and tough shot maker on the board, you take him and figure it out later because he's an extreme long-term asset. So if he's at 4, Charlotte would, I think, have no choice but to jump on him.
So it's not just Vink who's super high on Ace Bailey. One Tim Doyle, our colleague here at CBS Sports Network, is also very high on him. Kyle, answer for yourself. What did Ace Bailey ever do to you, and why do you hate him?
Look, I think in a vacuum, if you're ranking prospects, you're projecting prospects, Ace Bailey's tools, project as a potential star. There's no question about it. He actually did measure at 6'7.5". Without shoes at the combine, just to be clear, everyone thought that he was a little bit taller than that, but measured in a little bit smaller. But I think the qualities that he has as a shot maker, as a jumbo wing, as someone who can get a bucket in a pinch, like there's a lot of projectability that I think probably projects some optimism for him at the NBA level. The assist rate, as Finkelstein mentioned, it is, I think, worth mentioning at least that it was just over 8%. Guys in this same category, VJ Edgecombe, just over 16%, so double the assist rate. The shot diet for Ace Bailey at Rutgers last season, just not good and not sustainable. I don't think it will be conducive to winning if he continues to play the way that he does. And I think that is a real concern projecting to the NBA level. I think at number 4, though, for the Charlotte Hornets, they're in desperate need of searching for answers. They're trying to find stars and real good value. I think Ace Bailey at number 4 presents enough value that I would take him at number 4.
When you tell me that the shot diet wasn't good, I start grimacing because I don't know if you guys have watched much Charlotte Hornets basketball. That's their whole thing. The shot diet in Charlotte is horrendous. LaMelo Ball never saw a shot that he doesn't. I've described him as a dancing bear on roller skates shooting fireworks. Like the guy plays basketball in just like a really haphazard way. I like Brandon Miller, but he was hurt last year, so we'll see if Ace Bailey does follow him, how he would fit, but I don't love that description there. Also, I find it hilarious when we're talking about how tall he is. There's never been a college in the history of colleges that has accurately listed any kid's height or weight. They always inflate those things. So with shoes, without shoes, not surprising that he's a little bit shorter. All right, now we get into the Jazz and the Wizards. We're going back to Kyle here with the Jazz at number 5, who had designs on that number 1 pick. They were hopeful. They tanked all year long, and womp womp didn't work out for them. They fall to number 5. They could use a whole bunch of things here. They got some good professional basketball players, and I believe in Danny Ainge, but they don't have any star power. They need somebody to really pop here. So which way are they going, Kyle?
Yeah, they probably had designs on getting a Duke star and tanking late in the season. They're going to get a Duke star, just not the same one that they probably wanted. And it's Knueppel, who was the sidekick to Cooper Flagg this last season. I would have taken him at number 4 if he's on the board here for the Charlotte Hornets over Ace Bailey. Love to take him at number 5 for the Utah Jazz. 41% three-point shooter last season with Duke, 90th percentile jump shooter, 92nd percentile jump catch and shoot weapon, 70th percentile rim finisher, and 90th percentile on threes. I mean, this is a guy who has a high feel for the game. He's a good combo guard who can make plays with the ball, without the ball, one of the best shooters in the draft. And I feel very confident, John, that this is a guy that I think is going to have a very high production level at the NBA level. I don't think he's going to be a bust by any stretch. I think at number 5, there's a lot of value in just knowing that you're going to get a really good NBA player. I think Knueppel is exactly that.
I think the Jazz are starting to stack up these like good to not great players in Utah, and I expect that Danny Ainge is going to start to move some pieces around the board here. That backcourt's getting a little crowded too. If we go with Knueppel here, they've got Colin Sexton and Isaiah Collier as well, and on top of Jordan Clarkson still exists in Utah for reasons surpassing understanding. Where would he slot among that group?
I think he's a 3 in the NBA. Listen, we talk about schools that exaggerate measurements. Duke listed him at 6'8" this year. He was 6'5" without shoes on. So that's 6'6" with, which, is one of those things like we always knew that was an exaggeration, but it was even a bigger exaggeration than what Rutgers did. Nevertheless, I think he's a 3-man. I think that's the position he has an easier time defending. He's going to be much better switching up the lineup, meaning switcher onto bigger guys than he is smaller, quicker ones. But to your point, John, this is a team that hasn't really connected on one of these draft picks yet. Like Keontae George, is he the starting 2-guard long term? I don't know about that. Isaiah Collier made great strides last season, has always been a dynamic passer, but the shooting's a big question mark. So I think Khan next to him makes a whole lot of sense. But, the bottom line is like, listen, they traded Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert 3 years ago for the promise of getting draft picks that could land eventual stars. They still don't have one. I love Khan. I've had him in the top 7 or 8 for months now, but I'm not sure he's a star either. So this is kind of more of the same for Utah. And to be clear, that's not a knock on Khan, because I think he's got a very high floor and is going to be a very good NBA player for a long time.
Yeah, they got a whole bunch of guys. I mean, you mentioned Keontae George. I forgot to even mention Keontae George. They have a whole bunch of guys who are just like useful potential rotation pieces. But outside of Lauri Markkanen, and your mileage may vary on, say, John Collins and Walker Kessler or some of these guys. But outside of Lauri, there's nobody that I look at and I go, that's somebody that's a useful piece or potentially a trade chip for Dealer Danny. So we'll see which way they go there. All right, to the Washington Wizards. The Wizards also aggrieved. Also, the basketball gods and the lottery gods did not smile on them. They frowned on them. They fall to 6. Who are we here? We got Adam deciding who's going to go to the Washington Wizards, who they also have some nice young pieces. I'm a big fan of Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr. I think he will eventually become something. Jordan Poole can go. But, Bub Carrington, Justin Champagnie, there's some nice young guys to potentially build a team around. But that's like way in the future. So, they could use help all over the place. Which way are they going, Adam?
Trey Johnson, a prolific shot maker and a prolific scorer, put up huge numbers this year at Texas, and it was just continued linear progress from what we saw in high school when he was, again, one of the best volume scorers in the country. What was really impressive this year at Texas is he continued to put up big numbers, but he actually was more efficient, which is very counterintuitive because when a guy goes from high school to college, the game usually gets harder, shooting percentages drop, and it was just the opposite for Trey Johnson. This guy is a prolific shot maker. He's a scorer from day one. I think Washington would much rather have a lead guard here. But if Trey Johnson is available, and I think that's a big if because there's a very strong possibility he's out in the top 5, I think they would grab him here. And similar with Ace Bailey in Charlotte, you take the best available talent this high in the draft and you figure out the fit later.
Prolific shot maker sounds good for Washington. That could also potentially make Jordan Poole expendable, although I don't know what kind of market you would have for Jordan Poole because much like our guy LaMelo Ball, who's out there like the dancing bear on roller skates shooting off fireworks, Jordan Poole is in that same vein. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, I want to hear what Kyle thinks about Trey Johnson to the Washington Wizards, and then we've got the New Orleans Pelicans coming up, the Brooklyn Nets, a whole bunch of teams that could use some help. Also, the Toronto Raptors. Will do that on the other side as our mock draft continues. This is Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, we're also a podcast. You can find us wherever you get your favorite shows. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. We went into the break talking about the Washington Wizards. Adam gave them Trey Johnson from Texas. Kyle, quick thought on Trey Johnson and his fit there. Could that potentially make Adam described him as a prolific shot maker. Feels like maybe Jordan Poole could be expendable?
Yeah, I think we're to the point maybe where Jordan Poole may already be expendable, but Trey Johnson, adding him to the mix, I think makes him even more expendable. Really productive as a true freshman at Texas last season, as you can see here, led all college freshmen in scoring, had made more three-pointers than any other freshman with 89. And, just a guy who was a 40% three-point shooter last season, scored more points than the likes of Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper Jr., and Ace Bailey, guys that we're talking about who have already gone in this mock draft. Trey Johnson, I think, as Fink has pointed out time and again, this is a guy who, dating back to his high school career, has always been a prolific scorer. There were some questions, right, about how his playmaking would translate, and he's made some serious progressions as a passer, as a playmaker. He's not just a scorer, although he is absolutely that. He's a guy who I think is going to be an offensive weapon at the NBA level. So I love the idea of pairing him with Bub Carrington, who is, I think, a really nice pick last year in the draft for the Washington Wizards. Adding more scoring, adding more firepower for the Wizards. I'm here for it. I think Trey Johnson at number 6 makes a lot of sense.
Like that you mentioned my guy, Bub Carrington. They got some nice young pieces in Washington. I want good things for them. All right, on to the New Orleans Pelicans, who had a disastrous year last year with injuries. Everybody got hurt. They could use a whole bunch of things, including potentially a new home for Zion Williamson, but we'll get to that on a different show. Back to Kyle. Kyle, which way are the Pelicans going here? With new GM Joe Dumars, by the way.
Yeah, Dumars, we're gonna take Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma. And, first things first here, I think he's one of the more boomer bust prospects in this class. I think he's definitely a scary proposition. For Dumars, I think this would be a huge risk. There's no question. He was just a 28% three-point shooter last season. There's some questions about his shooting, how it projects to the NBA level, some questions about his defense, how that projects to the NBA level. Those are going to be the big swing skills for him. But, he had 66th percentile as a catch and shoot weapon last season. Really, really dynamic with the ball in his hands. He can get down the hill and attack the rim, create paint touches. I think he has some star power. There's a good chance that he busts and just does not meet the potential that we see in him. But, I think the chance that he becomes a star, I'd be willing to take a chance on him at number 7 for the New Orleans Pelicans.
Fink, I don't like some of the things that Kyle just said there. On my list of needs for the Pelicans, I have down shooting and defense, and Kyle said, not so sure about that. Health is the other thing. Is this kid at least able to play basketball?
Yeah. Yeah. So far he has been on the court. I would say this, though. The SEC was, by the numbers, the best conference in college basketball history last season. Fears was number one in usage in the SEC. So while everything Boone just said is accurate, you got to improve the shooting, you got to improve the defense, he's got to get a lot stronger. To me, the biggest adjustment is going to be adapting to less volume with the ball in his hands, because he had the greenest of lights last year at Oklahoma, and he earned it, right? They were better for it. He led them to the NCAA tournament. But that is not going to be the case in the NBA, at least not right away, no matter where he ends up. So his ability to blend in and share the ball with other good players, learning how to play off other good players, is going to be just a critical part of his adjustment to the NBA.
I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen in New Orleans. All these, we talked about the teams at the top of the draft that could end up introducing some chaos into this draft, and whether or not they're going to move off of their picks. Or I think the Pelicans are in play. The Nets, who we're going to talk about in just a second, them falling down puts them in play. The Raptors, Masai Ujiri already kind of loaded up on that team. And then you've got the Rockets at 10. I think all of these teams are potentially in play as movers, especially because, you have fears going to the Pelicans. What happens with that backcourt with DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum. So we'll see what Joe Dumars says now that he's back in the league. Wild stuff. Pick number 8 goes to the Brooklyn Nets, Adam. They could use all kinds of things. As I mentioned here, they fall to 8. They had designs on moving up. That didn't happen. They've got Cam Johnson, who they could potentially dangle. They've got a whole bunch of picks that they imported after trading Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks. Let's just assume that they keep the pick here. Which way are they going?
They, I think, could give Derik Queen a long look. He had a terrific freshman season at Maryland. And here's the deal with Queen. He's not going to win any athletic contests. He's not a bodybuilder, but he is a darn good basketball player. And he's been that at every step of his process, dating back to his freshman year in high school. This guy has always stood out every single place he's been. And in Brooklyn, where you've got an athletic rim running shot blocker like Nick Claxton, you put somebody like Derik Queen next to him. Now you've got a playmaking component in the front court, because Queen can really handle the basketball. He can really pass the basketball. Not surprisingly, he has terrific hands, which allows him to be a good rebounder, even though he's more ground bound than most NBA big men. So I think that becomes a formidable front court pairing. And remember, Brooklyn has got a ton of picks in the first round. They're just looking for long-term value. I also think you have to wonder, did they look to consolidate any of those picks and move up? I think, as Kyle noted, this is a draft that is widely perceived as having a top 6. So it's going to be interesting to see if they're in dealer mode come draft night.
All right. So what I hear there, Kyle, from Adam is Derik Queen, not athletic, ground bound, not strong, but wants to pair him with Nick Claxton. And generally, I'm not a huge fan of a double big lineup, although we have seen some more. It's become more in vogue lately. It's working out really well in Oklahoma City, although they're kind of an outlier. It worked out well until it didn't in Cleveland. And then the New York Knicks have 2 that they've been running with Cat and Mitchell Robinson. How do you feel about Adam pairing Derik Queen with Nick Claxton?
I like the pairing a lot. Derik Queen, maybe is not going to win any beauty contest, as Fink alluded to here, but I think the
or
IQ
Derik Queen.
Yeah, exactly, Derik Queen. But the passing ability at his size, I think, is something that separates him from other big men, not just in this class, but other big men prospects that are currently in the NBA. He's a really special passer and someone who I think, at his size, at his position, could operate as an offensive hub at the NBA level. I think there's something to be said here, too, about Brooklyn having 4 first-round picks in this year's class. Queen is widely regarded as one of the most fun players in this class, someone who could help set a culture for a Nets franchise that is resetting and rebooting in many ways. I think Queen, one of the younger prospects in this class, obviously, but could help set the culture moving forward. And for a young team that is obviously going to be rebooting, I think there's a lot to be said for what he could bring to the table on that aspect as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that they have 4 first-round picks. I'm fascinated to see what Sean Marks does with this team. Are they going to package some of those? Are they just going to draft a bunch of players, young guys, and start a youth movement? Are they going to try to go after Giannis? Whole bunch of different avenues, different doors that the Nets could walk through. All right, number 9, the Toronto Raptors. As I mentioned, Masai Ujiri is already kind of made up an idea of what he wants to do in the Eastern Conference next year. They previously traded for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett and put him next to Scotty Barnes. They have Jakob Poeltl. Then last year they went and traded for Brandon Ingram, who'd missed basically the second half of the season and didn't play at all. On paper, along with some of those rotation players they have coming off the bench, and a week in the Eastern Conference, I think the Raptors could move up a little bit here, but they could always use some more help. Kyle, which way are they going?
They're going to go with Kasparas Jakucionis, one of my guys in this class who I have ridden with throughout this draft process. He's a lead guard, a true point guard with tremendous size. He's got a lot of savvy to him, plays with good pacing. I think he's got good size. There's some shooting upside, some potential. I think he could end up slipping because there are some questions about how he shoots at the NBA level. Was just a 32% three-point shooter as a freshman at Illinois. Had some turnover issues late in the season, a little bit turnover prone, but this is a guy who I think projects well to be a true playmaker at the NBA level, a connective piece. And I think someone who could elevate the talent that's already in place. And for a Toronto Raptors team that has a lot of really young and exciting pieces already in place, I think Jakucionis is someone who would make a lot of sense for the Raptors and Masai Ujiri.
I got my eye on those Toronto Raptors. Like I said, the Eastern Conference, it's in flux now. We saw what happened with the Cavs, the Celtics, and Jason Tatum. They've got Brad Stevens has a ton of decisions to make there with how bloated their roster payroll is going to be. I just think if we're looking for some dark horse candidates next year that could potentially move up the standings, just keep an eye on those Toronto Raptors, who did a hilarious job of tanking, by the way, by sitting healthy starters towards the end of games. Just first rate, Sam Hinkie level tanking. Nice job by them. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side, our mock draft rolls on. The Houston Rockets are on the clock, and so is Adam Finkelstein. We'll do that next. This is Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, you can also find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, the bell symbol. Click on that, buddy, and you'll get notified when we go live. We'll be live tonight, right after Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals between the Wolves and Oklahoma City. Should be a fun one. Come and join us for that one. All right, mock draft rolls on. The Houston Rockets, you too, I know, huge Beyond the Arc fans, and as our Beyond the Arc listeners know, the Houston Rockets, I'm a big fan of. I was on them early. They have, Adam, a whole bunch of really useful pieces, which is why I suspect that they also could potentially start dangling some of these guys, the Tari Easons of the world, Cam Whitmore, maybe Reed Shepherd slides and starts getting some minutes. They've got a decision to make on Steven Adams, who's a free agent, but I think that they would like to bring him back. What they need really is a closer and some shooting. Are you getting them a closer and some shooting?
No, not at all. Not at all. What I'm getting them is a change-up pitcher to play behind Alperen Sengun. You mentioned Steven Adams in his contract situation. What they really don't have in this lineup, though, is a rim-running, shot-blocking lob threat at the 5 spot, and they would get that in Khaman Maluach. And Maluach is just 18 years old, but he's 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. He's got great movement skills for a guy his size. He's a terrific rim runner. He's a massive lob threat, one of Cooper Flagg's favorite targets this year. And he is a developing shot blocker. I think there's a temptation to describe him as this NBA-ready rim protector, and I think he will be in time, but he's just got to continue to get better. Again, he's 18 years old, and all of the intel about what kind of kid this is absolutely off the charts. So when you have kind of that Sengun type big man in the middle, if you need to get a different type of defensive oriented big man in the lineup, Maluach would give you that. He'd give you some long-term depth at the position. And as you said, they're just stacking young assets, and this gives them the type of one they don't yet have.
Kyle, I like the idea of giving them a rim runner and a lob threat. I like it less if they've got another big in front of them and they bring back Steven Adams, which I suspect that they'll want to do, because that's another team. We're talking about double big lineups. They ran some double big lineup between Alperen Sengun and Steven Adams to pretty good effect in that first round series, even though they didn't get past the Golden State Warriors. Is this just about adding another asset and figuring it out as you go?
Yeah, I don't hate this pick. I think Maluach makes a lot of sense here. I think there's some other guys on the board who I would give some consideration to as well. Carter Bryant from Arizona, a wing would make some sense, a 3-and-D type prospect who could be a plug and play, kind of a complementary piece. Egor Demin, who I think is one of the better passers in this class, still on the board here. Maluach, definitely a raw prospect, definitely an exciting prospect too. I talked to him at the NBA Draft Combine. As Fink mentioned, he's only 18 years old. He told me at the NBA Combine he started playing basketball when he was 13 or 14. And in fact, soccer was his first love. He really loved soccer and only picked up basketball because there were people playing basketball and they said, "You're tall. So he decided he'd play basketball. And so I think he's still kind of figuring out what he's going to be as a basketball player still. That's very exciting considering the production that he had at Duke for a team that won 35 games this last season. The size, the length, the ability to affect things on the defensive end of the floor, I think is really exciting and make a lot of sense, I think, for Houston to add some more size up front to complement Alperen Şengün.
All right. Well, now I'm rooting for this kid because Bill and I are also big soccer fans. So if he's a soccer fan, I'm going to be rooting for this kid. And by the way, who's excited for the Europa League final tomorrow? This guy is. You can catch it on Paramount Plus. All right. Now we come to pick number 11, the Portland Trailblazers. I'm fascinated by this because I was one of the people saying they need to tank harder last year. And then all of a sudden, like I started watching more Trailblazers games. I'm like, I get what they're trying to do with they have a whole bunch of young kids and none of them know what they're doing, but they're trying to win some games. A huge fan of Toumani Camara. I think they really hit on something there. Denny Advia had a really good season. The front court's a mess though with Donovan Clingan and DeAndre Ayton is still on the team and Robert Williams is still on the team. And then you've got a whole bunch of guards with Simons and Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp as a wing. Like, I don't know what they should do here. I think they have a theory of the case that it's just a whole bunch of young players and they're going to throw them in the mix and see what happens, Kyle. But who do you like for the Trailblazers at 11?
Yeah, we're going to take a little swerve here, and we're going to take Cedric Coward from Washington State. This is a guy who started his career at the Division III level, played 2 seasons at Eastern Washington, spent last year at Washington State, played only 6 games before an injury cut short his season. He's actually committed to Duke right now. A lot of people don't think he will make it to Duke because he has had a tremendous pre-draft process. His measurements have been great. I think the workouts have been really good as well. And he was the talk of the town when we were in Chicago last week at the NBA Combine. A career 39% three-point shooter. He's built like a brick, can dribble, pass, shoot. There's a lot of versatility, and I think he is one of the wild cards of draft night. If he goes top 10 on June 25th, when the draft is going on, it wouldn't be surprising. I think his range starts around 10 and goes to 25. And there's a lot of volatility in his stock, but there's a lot of intrigue in the NBA right now surrounding Cedric Coward. I think it'd make a lot of sense for this Portland team, for this Portland roster to take a chance on Cedric Coward.
The variance there, Fink, is very Shedeur Sanders-esque. Like, I love when Kyle does these picks because I remember last year Kyle did some off-menu picks as well last year. Never let it be. I focus on the NBA. That's my job here. But never let it be said that I don't do my due diligence before these mock drafts, Fink. And I went and I looked high and low and all around because I saw this pick ahead of time from Kyle. And Kyle seems to be much higher than pretty much everybody else out there doing it. How do you feel about this pick this high to 11 to the Trailblazers?
This is aggressive for me. I mean, this is a guy who played. What I can assure you is that he's not going to Duke anymore. I mean, that's done. If you follow college basketball recruiting, you can see they're already moving on and trying to plug that hole. So he will be in the draft. Whether or not he goes top 10 in the lottery, I'm more skeptical. I think somewhere around 20 probably makes more sense. But he certainly was one of the bigger, quote unquote, risers from the combine. And that's not necessarily because of what we saw in the court, because there really isn't much on the court. But as Boone said, his measurements were great. The intel about how he interviewed was great. And we've also heard that the feedback from some franchises he already met with prior to the combine was really positive as well. And so there was already momentum going into Chicago for him to pull out of the draft. And although we haven't gotten the official word yet, like I said, that is a foregone conclusion at this point.
All right, now we get to the Chicago Bulls at 12. I was having a good time at the end of the regular season watching the Chicago Bulls. I have a friend in Chicago who much aggrieved watching that team for years, just going, what are they doing? They have no direction in the front office. And on top of that, they were bad at basketball. And I asked him, like, hey, are you okay with this? And he said, yeah, I just having a good time watching Josh Giddey and Kobe White and Mattis Buzelis. And then it came time for the end of the season coin flip, and the Chicago Bulls lost the odds that ended up going to the Mavs, and the Mavs got the number 1 pick instead of the Bulls. So poor Bulls fans. Adam, you got this pick for them. I want nice things for them because they lost out on number 1. Give them nice things.
Well, nice things is Carter Bryant, and Carter Bryant is a prospect that I've been championing here for last few weeks, and somewhat surprising because he averaged 6 points pounds at Arizona, but he's a 3-and-D prospect. He guarded all 5 positions for Arizona, shot 45% on open catch and shoot threes, and he's a high-level athlete at 6'7". So there's a lot to like about him long-term, even if his statistical profile is a little underwhelming from his freshman season. But scouts really like him, and I think he has a good chance to end up in the lottery, whether it's with Chicago or potentially even as high as someone like Houston.
Got my fingers crossed for you Chicago Bulls fans. I know that was a rough one when you lose on a coin flip that could have delivered you Cooper Flagg. He would have been perfect fit in Chicago, and now instead he's going to Dallas. We're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to wrap up our second annual Beyond the Arc mock draft with the Atlanta Hawks and the San Antonio Spurs. Don't go anywhere. Fink and Boone are here. This is Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc, continuing our second annual mock draft. We're going to right into it. Kyle's up on the clock with the Atlanta Hawks, who had the number 1 pick last year, 13 this year. Where are they going?
Egor Demin from BYU. This is the best passer in this year's draft class. He's got really good size, can see over defenders at a really high level. It's a little bit more slender. I think he needs to fill out some of his frame. He actually came from overseas, played in Russia, and played this last season as a one and done at BYU. I think there's a reason probably why he ends up slipping a little bit on draft night. He's a little bit more slender, needs to add some girth to his frame. I think he needs to improve his defense. But there's a lot of promise with his shooting ability. BYU played a lot of zone last season. I'm willing to kind of put my hand over my eyes and maybe disregard some of that, just hoping that the promise of him being a foundational prospect as a passer will end up translating to some of the other parts of his game for the Atlanta Hawks at number 13.
Adam, Kyle says that he needs to add girth to his frame. We love a girthy frame here at Beyond the Arc, but he also says that he's a good passer. They already have a really good passer. His name is Trae Young. He had an excellent passing season last year.
Yeah, you know what Trae Young doesn't do, though, is defend. And you know what Egor Demin can't do? Defend. So listen, Boone is 100% right. Best passer in the draft, 6'9" without shoes on. But I don't know how you play 2 non-defenders on the court at the same time. Of course, Trae Young contract, who knows what's going to happen. Fair range for Demin. I just don't know about the fit because of already defensive limitations within that rotation and how he might further complicate them.
All right, now we come to the end of the draft. Number 14, the San Antonio Spurs. Adam, their second pick in this lottery. Again, they tend to be a little bit more conservative, but I still think that they might have something cooking here too in case they get into the Giannis sweepstakes. Who do you have going to the San Antonio Spurs with the final pick of the lottery?
I've got them going with Liam McNeeley, a prospect who has been projected as a lottery pick for the vast majority of the year, but now you see him slipping down some mock drafts. I think that when teams really dive into the due diligence, specifically the shooting numbers, they're going to find that he is a much better shooter than the numbers showed last season. He's going to create some very necessary floor spacing around Wemby. We talked about the need for floor spacing with their earlier pick. He also grew an inch this year at UConn. He's a legit, super tough, super smart, checks all the boxes for what San Antonio typically prioritizes, and I don't anticipate his slip to be what others are forecasting at this point.
Kyle, every team could use shooting. How do you feel about McNeeley to the Spurs?
It makes a lot of sense. The Spurs have had some success drafting from UConn, obviously Stephon Castle last year. I think the question with McNeeley, right, is, talking to people around Chicago, if he's such a good shooter, why are his shooting numbers not backing that up? Last season, just 32% from three-point range. He was below 40% from field goal range. I'm with Fink, though. I do believe that this is a pretty good range for him. I'm buying the dip on Liam McNeeley. I think eventually he will become a good shooter, even if the numbers don't necessarily bear that out right now. I love his competitive spirit. I love his competitive drive on defense. I think you check a lot of boxes, especially for the Spurs, someone who can be a glue guy to keep things together for San Antonio.
Well, you guys are our glue guys. If I had the number one pick, I'd split it between the two of you. Check them out. All their mock draft stuff. They absolutely killed this second mock draft. Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone, thank you so much. That's going to do it for us today on Beyond the Arc. Come and join us live on YouTube tonight after game one of the Wolves in Oklahoma City. You can find us over there at Beyond the Arc CBS. But for now, I'm John Gonzalez. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. See